Intense moments at the Kentucky State Capitol today as the General Assembly voted to override Governor Andy Beshear's veto of controversial legislation that opponents call anti-transgender. From
rallies and protests outside the Capitol to even shouting at lawmakers in the chambers, emotions ran high today. WKYT's Chad Hedrick now is in studio with us, and we have learned that 19 people were actually arrested today.
Yeah, we saw those dramatic images and video coming out of the House today. Kentucky State Police say this all happened in the House of Representatives up in the gallery. They say the Sergeant of Arms requested their help to restore order. Troopers say the protesters were given the option to leave without any enforcement or they would be arrested. Now those 19 have been cited for criminal trespassing. Disorder in the Kentucky House of Representatives Wednesday as lawmakers voted to override Governor Andy Beshear's veto of Senate Bill 150.
We have created an environment of hate, and then we look at them like there's something wrong with them.
As House Democrats stood on the House floor, dozens of protesters standing against the legislation shouted chants. 19 were arrested and escorted out by Kentucky State Police. The arrests came after a day of rallies on both sides of the issue before lawmakers voted to override.
Students at young ages in our publicly funded schools are being told they can be a different gender, and perhaps they were born in the wrong body. Tell me what that does to a child to think they were born wrong.
Inside the Capitol, supporters of the legislation spoke in the rotunda at a Protect Parental Rights rally. Meanwhile, outside, opponents rallied before going in to continue voicing opposition. Supporters of the bill say the legislation prohibits sex change procedures and hormone treatments for children. It will also not allow the mandated use of pronouns. Opponents call it hate.
Let's not let 1% of the population determine our destiny here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You all are stronger and you're better than that.
I stand here today as the first openly LGBTQ elected in this body. It's very hurtful, it's very sad, and it's a shame.
Rebecca Blankenship, who is the director of Banned Conversion Therapy Kentucky, said today that this legislation has, quote, sentenced many to death. She told me in a text tonight that her organization is actively coordinating with other groups to plan a lawsuit. Amber.
Chad, thank you. Part of the bill goes into effect immediately, including preferred pronouns in schools and policies regarding bathrooms. The part about gender-affirming health care for trans youth goes into effect in 90 days.
Also